Hi everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about working out according to your menstrual cycle, which is something that I've been seeing a lot on social media, how apparently women working out the same way men would isn't as effective because men's hormones work on a 24-hour cycle, whereas women's hormones work on a 28-day cycle, which is essentially like our period. So I've been super intrigued about this, but I'm very much the person who's like, okay, like I want to see the results, give me the before and after, I want to see if it really works. So I have decided that I'm going to be testing this out myself. So we're going to be starting today, and today is day 3 of my period. I actually meant to start on like the first day of my period, but the first 2 days like really took me out as far as like the pain goes, but it's all good. We're starting today. Don't beat yourself up about it. So kicking things off, your period is the start of your monthly cycle, and this is typically when your hormone levels are at their lowest, and because of that, you are like having less energy, you're less motivated to like work things out or really just get anything done at all. Because of that, your stamina and endurance are also usually lower, which makes it harder to do workouts like heavy lifting, cardio, especially since the hormones that peak during this time like to break tissue down, which means your body isn't building muscle as well as it usually does during like other stages of your cycle. So instead, this is really seen as like a good time period to do like lower intensity workouts like yoga, Pilates, stretching, walking, that kind of thing, to help relieve like any sort of discomfort and just really relax your body. Now, I will say that as someone who isn't super fond of working out during my period, I really did enjoy doing these workouts during that time, because for the first time probably ever, it felt like it just made sense, and the workouts were challenging enough to where I obviously knew and felt that I was working the muscles in my body, but it wasn't so bad to where like it was hard to get through or it was extremely uncomfortable or painful, which is kind of what I'd experienced in the past whenever I tried to do workouts such as weightlifting while I was on my period. So after having like attempted it for this first time, I do recommend it, and it really kept me going and made me want to continue moving and just working out, which I definitely appreciated since it's not usually something I've experienced in the past. We have exited the like menstruation phase of my cycle, and now we're just straight up in the follicular phase. And so what that means is that your body has more energy and it's working harder / working better in terms of like building muscle and like healing any muscle tears from, you know, when you're like doing weightlifting. So during this time period, from now until ovulation and even during ovulation, it's like the perfect time period to do any sort of like heavy cardio, heavy weightlifting, high intensity interval training. As you guys know, I'm like starting to get back into working out after taking like a year or so off. So, you know, I'm not super excited at the idea of like heavy weightlifting or doing HIIT because I'm so like out of shape, out of practice. So we'll see. Okay, so I'm back on the camera, which means that we're now in the next phase of our cycle, which is the luteal phase. This phase is actually considered to be like the longest of the phases because it lasts approximately 2 weeks. So it kicks off right after ovulation. And because of that, like the first couple of days of this phase, studies, not me, studies say that you're gonna still have, you know, that energy, that drive that you had during the follicular phase. You're gonna be like pushing yourself to like lift those heavy weights, or, you know, you might not be, but it's a good time to be pushing yourself with those heavy weights and like the high intensity interval training, like strenuous cardio, that kind of thing. But as you get further along in this phase, then your energy will slowly start to like taper off and dwindle. And so your body temperature is supposed to get higher, which as a woman, you probably know what I'm talking about. And apparently it actually gets harder for your body to access like stored carbs that your body has, which explains why we end up feeling more tired and like we just want to eat, right? And so like that's apparently the reason for that. I don't know, I'm just telling y'all what I read online. I read a couple different articles to make sure that I'm telling y'all factual information. So because of that, because you're having that taper off, then at that point it's recommended for you to kind of like still do your workouts, right? But have it be a little bit more moderate. So if you're lifting weights, then that's great, keep doing that. But instead of going super heavy and pushing yourself on the heavy weights, it's recommended to do more moderate weights at higher reps. Cardio is still recommended, but again, moderate, not necessarily HIIT or like super strenuous cardio. Walking is encouraged, yoga, Pilates is still encouraged. Those are always good things. And so this period is just really gonna go from like being up high to slowly trickling down and kind of like getting into that phase where you really start to feel your body like changing and preparing for your cycle to begin all over again. So don't be surprised if you start to feel like you're up here and then you end somewhere down here by the end of the luteal phase. It's just a very regular thing that we're all gonna experience during this phase. So it's a time where it's really important to like pay attention and like listen to your body and make sure that you're giving your body what it needs. Okay, so now that I've gone through a whole cycle of trying this out, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Personally, before this, I hadn't been doing any workouts for a while, so this was like a way for me to test this out along with trying to get consistent with working out again. And I will say that one of the things that I super enjoyed about doing this is that every week, more or less, kind of looked different. And so that might sound kind of weird, especially if you're used to working out like on a consistent basis and you're following like a specific plan where you're kind of doing the same kind of workouts every day. This one was different in the sense that, like I mentioned, you have different energy levels, so it's recommended to approach your workouts differently depending on what phase you're at. But I liked that because as someone who was like getting back into working out after more than like 5-6 months of doing it, maybe I think even longer actually, but regardless, if you're a complete beginner or someone who's been taking like a very long break from working out, I do think that doing it in this fashion was super convenient and super helpful, because when you're working out the same way all the time, where you're just like pushing yourself extremely hard with like high intensity interval training, super intense workouts, lifting heavy weights on a super consistent basis, you get really tired, you get really sore. It can be really hard on your body, especially if you're not used to it. So with this, because it was recommended that you do different kinds of workouts and that you approach your exercise in a different manner depending on where you're at in your cycle, it actually made it super easy to like stick to, in the sense that you kind of had like an expectation of like when you're going to be pushing yourself hard, but then knowing that after that, whether it be like 1 or 2 weeks after that period, that it was going to ease up some, so it wouldn't be like you're constantly like killing yourself trying to get these workouts in, or like overexerting yourself, or like trying to convince yourself to work out that day because you're so tired or you're extremely sore or whatever. So like it definitely took away some of like, I guess, the negative aspects, I guess you could call it, of like working out, or like after effects that make it difficult to like be consistent. So essentially like the workouts kind of varied throughout the month, and because of that, it made it so much easier to like be consistent and like integrate movement and like exercise for the whole month for me, as opposed to like taking 2 days off 1 week and then 3 days off 1 week and then 2 days off and then 4 days off, like because I'm so tired, if that makes any sense. Besides working out and like being more consistent, obviously, I would say that like the biggest pro that I got out of this that I wasn't super expecting was just having a much better understanding of my body, because I had to do some reading on like the different phases of the cycle and what that meant for like your energy levels and your body's ability to like build muscle, that kind of thing. So because I had a better understanding of how my body is working throughout the month, it actually made it a lot easier for me to kind of like plan out my days, plan out my weeks, kind of get things done, know what to expect of myself, what I could or couldn't do. And so that ended up being a part that like actually went and became useful in other parts of my life instead of just the workout aspect, because like during those first 2 weeks, you know, after my cycle had ended, like I knew that I was gonna have more energy, and I could actually feel that in my body. And like I was super chipper, my energy levels were super high, I was in a great mood, I was able to get a lot of things done, I was feeling extremely social. And then during the second half of my cycle, during the luteal phase, like I had read that like you're gonna start to feel your body get slower, things are gonna be a little bit harder, you're gonna have less energy. And because I knew that, I was kind of paying more attention to how my body was feeling, how I was doing. And I did notice that like my energy levels were much lower, I was having a hard time sleeping. So I ended up being a little bit more irritable. It was hard for me to like get work done for like YouTube, do things around the house, just because I felt a little bit out of sorts. And because I knew that, I actually found myself engaging in like a lot more positive self-talk and just giving myself more grace throughout those couple of days, because I wasn't like expecting myself to be performing at where I was performing when my body was just working in a much better pace. So I think that was my favorite thing that like I gained from this, because it's something that outside of the exercises I can actually continue to apply to my everyday life. And because I wasn't like beating myself up or just expecting me to be like Wonder Woman during a time period where I physically am not able to, it just made everything a lot easier, and I found myself being more productive. Maybe because my list wasn't as long, maybe because my expectations were more realistic, or maybe just because I was being more positive with myself, which in turn like manifested into just doing better. But regardless, like it was something that I would consider to be a huge pro that I can carry on in my life. And so I think that was like the best part for me personally, besides the workout itself. If you are curious though about like the effect on my body with following this program, and like if my body changed, if I lost any weight, I did weigh myself at the very beginning of this on like day 1 of my period, and my weight was 165.5. I am 5'5", so for me personally and where I like to be, it is on the heavier side. And I like to sit maybe like between 140 to 150. And then I did weigh myself again like a day before my cycle started all over again, and I was weighing at 161.4. So I lost like 4 pounds. So I lost like 4 pounds during that month, which I'm super happy about, especially because my goal specifically when it comes to like my body and weight loss and exercises is not necessarily to lose weight. Like it is a goal, but it's not my top goal. My top goal is to just like integrate movement and exercise for my body to take care of myself and to just be a healthier, better version of me. So like that's why I wanted to test this out, because if it ends up being something that is more sustainable and easier to integrate into my life than like pushing myself to lift super heavy weights and like run 3 or 4 miles every day, if this is easier than that, because that doesn't come naturally, or it's just not something that I'm gonna realistically stick to, then I want this to work. And so based off of how I felt throughout the month, how easy it was to stick to it, how consistent I can see myself being and how consistent I was, and then obviously the positive effects that I got on my day-to-day life, along with the 4 pounds that I lost, then I would personally consider this to be 100% worth it. And I do plan to continue following this in my everyday life as far as like working out and stuff goes. So that would be like my overall takeaway and my final thoughts on this. I do plan to do like maybe a 3 or a 6 month check-in on this. We'll see. I'm not 100% decided yet, but it's something I'm thinking about. So if you guys would like to see that, just let me know in the comments below. And if so, then I will create some new videos on how this is going in the long term. But again, I do 100% recommend it. I do think it works. I do find it to be better for me personally than working out the way I was before. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.